Hello, I'm Christina Brown, and this is Our Take on Arise TV, where we discuss stories and topics of discussion that are related and of interest to women. And joining me today is, as guest host, is Demetria Lucas. Demetria Lucas, welcome to the show.
Thank
so good
you
to
for
see
having
you.
me. It's a pleasure.
You are the author of A Bell in Brooklyn.
I am.
And I understand that you are actually celebrating your blog, A Bell in Brooklyn,
Yes.
is actually celebrating, what is it, the 6th or 7th year?
The 7th year, yes, 7 years. 7 years of a blog. It's kind of
Congratulations.
flew by.
Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, my blog it started off with dating and relationships, and that's what the book is based on. It was basically my chronicles being a single woman dating in New York, sort of like a Sex and the City, but a black girl's version. So I gave my take on, the guys I was dating, some of the interactions my friends were going through, and it was very honest and very real, no sugarcoating, the good, bad, and sometimes the ugly.
Ooh,
Yeah.
sounds juicy.
It was.
A little later in the show, we're actually going to be talking about relationships. In fact, we're going to be talking about arranged marriages. So I can't wait to get your take
I've got
on
some
that.
insight.
I bet you do.
I've got some take.
All right, well, don't hold back. Meanwhile, topping our daily take headlines today, the Supreme Court has struck down a key part of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the map that determines which states must get federal permission before they change their voting laws. 9 states with a history of discrimination at the polls, mostly in the South, must get approval from the Justice Department or a special panel of judges before they change their voting laws. Well, despite Nelson Mandela's failing health, President Barack Obama is expected to visit him during Obama's short tour of Africa. Mandela remains in critical condition with a lung infection. The 94-year-old has captured the world's attention as his health has deteriorated. Outside his Pretoria hospital, several doves were released to signify the freedom Nelson helped usher in following years of South Africa's apartheid rule. And Demetria, this is, of course, something that we have all been covering for weeks, if not months. I mean, for the past several weeks at least.
He's been ill for a while.
We've been seeing him go in and out of the hospital, but really for the past few months, he has been under the watchful eye of really the world.
Yes. It's very difficult to explain what Nelson Mandela means, not just to South Africa, but just as a world leader in terms of his practices, his integrity, the message he shared. I don't know anyone who hasn't read was it Long Walk to Freedom? I poured through a tomb, but I poured through it. But he's just an inspiration to so many people. He's had such an impact on the way we look at the world and the changes he's made to it. Everyone's goal is to come and make a difference while they're here, and prime example.
And he certainly has done that. There's
Definitely.
certainly no question of that. And when you see the outpouring of support that is coming in from around the globe, you definitely get the sense that there is no question just how much of an impact and how much of his legacy will affect generations for years to come.
Yes, well, we're praying for him. Everybody's praying for him.
Certainly. Well, this story, this one coming to us from Brazil, Brazilian demonstrators may have finally inched closer to government concessions following weeks of massive protests. Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff has announced plans for several reforms. She's promised to move forward with fiscal measures to steady the economy, but also reduce inflation. And Demetria, we were talking about this not too long ago, just before the show. I mean, these are scenarios that we're really seeing play out in a number of different countries around the world. People taking to the streets in large numbers, demanding change in the way that government is run. Yeah,
well, I think after the situation in Egypt and they saw the power of numbers, the power of coming together. Everyone always says, the fist is stronger than the fingers, but people are starting to really see it. And social media, of course, is helping fuel these protests around the world. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see what's going to happen in Brazil in the coming weeks.
And I think the other thing that's important, particularly about this situation, is Dilma Rousseff herself was someone who, in a lot of ways, at least in the initial stages of the demonstrations, embraced the fact that so many people were taking to the streets and were using their voice and using their ability to gather and galvanize. A much different response, for example, than what we saw in Turkey, in Egypt, and in other countries.
Well, it would be smart of her to listen to, her people, because Turkey and Egypt didn't end up so well for their leaders.
Not at all. Not at all. Well, this lady, someone who is yet to be named right now, simply known as witness number 8. But when prosecutors call her to the stand in the George Zimmerman murder trial today, she is expected to paint a very distinct picture about the last few minutes of Trayvon Martin's life. She's considered a star witness and was on the phone with the unarmed 17-year-old just before he was killed. And of course, this coming on day 2 of the trial, we of course heard the opening arguments yesterday, the George Zimmerman trial. The prosecution certainly sounded very concise, succinct, and clear in their opening statement. The defense, not so much. It took 3 hours for them to get their opening statements out. Yeah,
you know, I wasn't able to watch the trial yesterday. I was on a deadline, unfortunately, but everyone kept talking about, like, he opened with a knock-knock joke.
Unbelievable.
The defense lawyer. It's so disrespectful to Trayvon Martin's family. Like, this isn't a joke. This is a dead teenager, a dead, unarmed teenager at that. I'm glad to see that this trial is finally taking place. It's been long delayed, and everyone's been watching to see how it turns out.
And it doesn't seem like this is going to be something that will resolve itself quickly.
No.
The estimates are somewhere between anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, potentially, for the trial. That seems unusually long, but given what is at stake here,
yes.
We're talking about a case that really rattled the emotional foundation, not only of the area in Florida, but of the country in terms of just bringing racial tensions back to the forefront, back to the topic of discussion yet again.
No, I think it's a fear of every mother, of every aunt, of every cousin, of every young black man or older black man, that you're just sort of, not even sort of, that you're walking down the street, minding your business, not bothering anyone, and that you are attacked, killed for nothing. The kid was coming back from the store getting, you know, soda and Skittles, like iced tea and Skittles.
It is difficult to imagine just what kind of explanation will be a reasonable, beyond reasonable doubt explanation for the jury to potentially acquit George Zimmerman of second-degree murder, because based on certainly the court of public opinion, it looks like it would be a very difficult case to consider him anything other than guilty. But of course, it is in the hands of six jurors right now.
6 jurors, yeah, so we will let them decide.
Yeah, certainly. Well, you have been watching Our Take, and of course, I must do my shameless plug, as I always do. You can follow us on Twitter. You can also like us and leave comments on our Facebook fan page. And of course, you can always do that simply by going to @OurTakeArise TV. But before we do that, I want to move on to one of our last stories for the Daily Take Roundtable. And this, it's actually quite difficult to imagine that 4 years now have gone by since the tragic death of Michael Jackson. Near the time of the 4th anniversary of his death, however, his 2 children, Paris and Prince, have actually found themselves witnesses in his wrongful death trial initiated by Jackson's mother. Dimitri, do you remember where you were when you heard that Michael Jackson had died?
Absolutely. I was in the Essence offices, and I think a CNN tweet went out, you know, I think somebody had said it before, maybe it was like a TMZ, and no one believed it. And then CNN sent out, you know, the breaking news, the breaking news email, and the whole office just, the streaks like throughout the office. Some of my editors started crying. It was a very, very emotional day. Michael Jackson just, he seemed like he'd go on forever.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, I couldn't even imagine it. Even now, it's hard to fathom that he's not here. And it's been 4 years.
And he was preparing for that huge tour.
Concert, yeah.
We saw images in the lead up prior to his death of him performing, of him practicing his routine with the dancers. I mean, it's the thought of him not being with us just seemed too far from reality. I remember that I was in a movie theater, and what's interesting is I can't even remember what movie I was watching, but I remember I was in the movie theater, and naturally I turned off my cell phone when I was in the theater. And when I came out of the theater, I turned my cell phone on, and the first thing that I saw was a series of email messages and tweets saying that Michael Jackson had died. And in my mind, it's funny, I was actually thinking, which Michael Jackson are they talking about? They can't be talking about the pop star, not Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson. It can't be him. It has to be somebody else. I just could not wrap my mind around him not being with us.
Yeah.
It seemed too far from reality. And then I think the other thing that made his passing so difficult were the circumstances surrounding it as well. You know, it wasn't like this was, say, for example, someone who was already suffering from some sort of illness or even, you know, an accident of some sort. You know, it just seemed suspect, and there were rumors flying as to whether or not, you know, was he really passed, you know?
Well, it was so sudden. And then I think also, too, because of the doctor, Conrad Murray, his involvement. You expect your doctor to be there to protect you. And then there was the idea that, I mean, actually found guilty, wasn't he? Like,
found guilty of manslaughter,
you know,
that's right.
Could have done something and chose not to and went and cleaned up the room. And it's like, no, Michael Jackson is dying, you call 911. Like, you don't sit around and try to figure it out, you know? But yeah, it was so tragic, so sudden and so tragic. I can't believe it's been 4 years.
And what's funny about that is that it almost now feels like it was just yesterday. It doesn't feel like it was 4 years ago. With regards to Conrad Murray, Michael Jackson, we now know had overdosed on propofol, which is, for lack of a better word, it's the kind of anesthetic that doctors use when putting someone under, sedating them for surgery. And as you mentioned, Dr. Conrad Murray found guilty for administering that very deadly dose. What is kind of fascinating about the circumstances surrounding Michael Jackson's death is that in many ways he continues to live on, not only obviously in his music and what he did for people around the world, but also the controversy. It doesn't end.
It doesn't end.
And right now, as I mentioned earlier, you know, his children are embroiled in a wrongful death lawsuit brought by Jackson's mother against AEG, the concert promoter. So that in and of itself almost gives him new life, of course not in the most appropriate way.
Right. Yeah, it's that's not the way I would like to see Michael Jackson live on. I feel like when he was alive, like the rumors and the controversy, we really didn't do right by him as a public audience. We put him through a lot that was unnecessary. And so I would really just like his music and the best parts of his legacy to live on. I hate to see that, you know, there's still so much drama 4 years later.
Yes, and in light of that drama, of course, we cannot avoid the discussion about his daughter Paris and her attempted suicide about a week and a half or so ago. It seems like drama follows him just as much as his music highs and lows. It follows him, and it certainly follows his family. I'm curious as to what kind of feedback were you getting on your blog, A Bell in Brooklyn, at that time?
For Michael Jackson's passing?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. You know, I don't know that I blogged about it immediately. Like, I was very upset because my offices at the time when I was working for Essence, we were located right off Rockefeller Center. So after work, we walked out to Times Square, and I don't know where everyone went and got their Michael Jackson memorabilia. Like, it was in the closet, apparently. Like, people have pants and you know, glittered suit jackets just hanging out, waiting for you.
In the red leather jacket,
in the red leather jacket. But people were in the middle of Times Square just sort of hanging out, singing along, dancing in the streets. It was a very sad occasion, but also very celebratory. So I was doing Michael Jackson Michael Jackson celebratory moments, and then, you know, Spike Lee did a big concert in Brooklyn. So yeah, I was doing more celebrating than sitting down writing. Like,
right. I remember I went out and I bought a pair of aviators.
Nice.
Sunglasses. That was, you know, that was channeling my inner Michael Jackson.
I did YouTube videos to like the old Jackson 5 videos and danced around in my socks. That was my homage. Yeah.
That's the way that we want to remember him, by bringing joy and enthusiasm.
Yes.
Well, keep it right here. You are watching Our Take. We've got a lot more going on in the show.
Bigger, stronger, and more domineering than any other. Elephants are the centers of the animal kingdom, but unfortunately today, they're under attack. Tens of thousands are being killed each year just for their ivory. So please support conservation and never buy products made from ivory, because when the buying stops, the killing can too.
Ndingululu Chumsila, mna ndingumama owasindayo kwi-cancer, i-cancer eyayisisibelekweni. Thina bantu, imistake yethu apha ikhoyo, kwawuthiwa umntu une-cancer, simjongele uba laa mntu ngomso uzosweleka. andizange ndibe nabunzima kakhulu ngoba into ebangela uba nditsho eyam yabhaqwa msinyane ngoba into enyanzelekileyo kuba ube nethemba xa kuthiwa unento. Isapoti endayifumanayo kumyeni wam, kubantwana bam, nefemeli yam yonke. Eyona nto ndandinayo mna entliziyweni yam kukuba okusalayo nam ndizophila ndifane nabanye abantu.
Lo myalezo niwuphathelwe i-JSI and Livestrong Cancer Anti-Stigma Initiative.
I wonder why anyone would do that to themselves. We all need air to breathe, to live, and so does the earth. But we're choking it with plastic bags. Let's stop using plastic bags and give the earth a chance to breathe. Refuse, reduce, reuse, recycle.
We are discussing travel and studying overseas, and we want to hear from you on Facebook and Twitter. So join the conversation at #OurTakeAriseTV. And remember to leave your comments on our Facebook page, Our Take on Arise TV, and tell us what you think. Well, for some parents, sending their child away to summer camp can actually feel a little scary. Will my daughter be okay? Can my son contact me whenever he wants? So imagine what it must feel like to see your middle school child go away for a year and to another country. Well, that's exactly what happened to my next guest. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. David Hill allowed his daughter, Carrie, to study abroad when she was 12 years old. And it didn't stop there. Carrie returned to Europe for multiple study abroad programs. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
You probably have a whole bunch of stamps on your passport. You must have enjoyed yourself.
Yeah, it was definitely great. I first went to Spain when I was 12 because I was interested in learning Spanish. So I was telling Dad that I wanted to learn Spanish. I was interested in becoming fluent, and he thought that it would definitely be worthwhile to study abroad.
Well, Dad, there's a lot of different ways to get Carrie to learn Spanish. What made you decide to take the next step as opposed to getting a tutor and sending her to Spain?
Well, she came to me one day and she said, Dad, I really want to learn how to speak Spanish. So the first thing I said to her was, well, you're not going to learn a lot of Spanish in our house. So she had to go somewhere where people speak Spanish, and I felt that the full immersion experience would give her the best opportunity.
But Carrie was just 12 years old.
Yeah.
You weren't worried at all? I mean,
Well,
she's so young.
After I dropped her off, I was worried.
I bet you were.
What was I thinking?
Yeah.
But she was always very adventurous. She's been going away to camp since she was 6 years old. First time we dropped her off at camp, we were there for about 10 minutes trying to make her feel comfortable, and she was like, okay, bye, Mom and Dad, I have to go with my friends.
You were like, later.
So, yeah, she's always been
like,
very adventurous, very mature for her age in terms of interacting with other people.
And Carrie, I understand that you spent a year in Spain, then you came back, and then you returned to Spain?
I went to France.
You went to France,
in
okay.
11th grade.
In the 11th grade. Now, what an exciting feeling that must have been like. Do you hope to continue your international study abroad programs even in college?
Oh, definitely. I want to continue language possibly, and I want to study abroad in college. Yeah.
Nice. Carrie, what has your experience been being an African-American teenager in countries where there aren't so many of us, so many Black people?
Well, when I was in Spain, for example, I went to a Spanish high school, and I might have been like the 1 out of 3 Black kids, like in a preschool to 12th grade type of setting. But I was maybe like, I was a minority at this school, but at the same time, it was a new experience, and I was able to learn from my classmates, and they learned from me, and not necessarily just being Black, but also being American, and Yeah.
Carrie, did you ever feel like you were missing out on kind of classic American experiences like prom or going to various typical high school events, whether it's high school football or just participating in what some would consider like the typical American experience? Did you miss out on that?
Well, I still go to high school in the States. So even though like when I was in Spain and my friends were starting high school, it was definitely worth it to go abroad. And next year I'll be a senior, and so I guess I'll have senior.
So you'll be able to go to prom
exactly.
then. Yeah, you kind of have the
Prom
best of both worlds.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, well, I want to bring someone else into the conversation. Our next guest is joining us via Skype from Oakland, California. He started diversity abroad after studying in Mexico and Spain. Andrew Gordon speaks to student groups and professionals about international education and careers. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you give me a sense as to what the state of the movement is like when it comes to increasing minorities, particularly African American children, in international study abroad programs?
Yeah, no, thanks. It's a great movement. There's one in the past talked about diversity of color studying abroad. Something that wasn't necessarily really mainstream, but we see much more now. At the high school level, your guests, as well as at the collegiate level, many more students of color studying abroad.
What's at risk if more minority students aren't participating in these international study abroad programs? What are they missing out on, say, for example, when it comes to college applications or jobs?
And I think that's at the heart of it. A lot of times people think about study abroad. They think about, oh, you're gallivanting throughout Europe, and it's just a fun experience. And don't get me wrong, it is a fun experience. But at the end of the day, we live in a very globalized, interconnected world. And students that have international experience, speak different languages, they're that much more prepared to be competitive, both when it comes to admission to top and competitive colleges, but as well, the day when it comes to graduating and getting jobs. If you have two students that have all things being equal academically, but one has international experience and speaks a different language and can articulate how that experience has helped them be in a position to communicate across culture, so on and so forth, they're much more competitive than the student that hasn't had that.
Andrew, we heard David talk about how Carrie came to him one day and said, Dad, I want to learn how to speak Spanish. And he said, well, you're not going to learn it here. Go to Spain. That kind of seems like a response that you wouldn't necessarily hear a lot. So I'm curious, who are the type of kids, and furthermore, who are the type of parents that are supporting international study abroad programs?
Well, and that's true. I would say, in some sense, that David may be a little bit of an anomaly in this, in that many parents aren't necessarily as supportive of their students going abroad, and there's a couple of reasons why. But for certain communities, particularly when you look at the African American community and other communities of color, many times the parents themselves haven't had international experiences. So the idea of sending their student overseas to learn a language or to gain a different experience, that's hard to grasp sometimes. Most of the time, the students that we see going overseas are students who come from more privileged backgrounds and come from backgrounds where international travel has been a part of what they do, what their family has done and what their parents have done. And so that's where you see a big gap between, unfortunately, between students of color versus their Caucasian counterparts.
David, I'm curious, what kind of support, what kind of research did you do in finding a host family, someone that you feel comfortable with? Did you find a network there?
Well, what I had to do is I actually had to find the programs. There are a plethora of programs, and so it can be a little daunting, a little confusing because there are a lot of them out there. Some of them are just piggybacking off other programs. But the programs themselves are the ones who pick the host families. So at least all of the programs that I was familiar with, they pick the host family for you. But most of them, they use families over and over again. And if there is a problem, because sometimes there's a bad match. We never had that experience. We've always been very fortunate. We had great matches. But if there's a bad match, they'll find another family for you, usually, in the same community.
Andrew, I'm curious as to what is the typical barrier. Is it cost? Is it simply lack of awareness about these programs being out there and available to minority families and students?
And that's a great question. Cost is always somewhat of a barrier. At the end of the day, if you're coming from a very disadvantaged financial background, you look at the price tag of some programs and it doesn't seem feasible. But where our organization promotes much more the awareness aspect of it is that the more that students and their family are aware of the programs and the benefits, the personal, the academic, the career benefits that students gain from study abroad, the more they'll look at the experience as an investment in the student's future. And so the same way a parent may see the price tag of college, of going to college and say, oh my gosh, this is so expensive, but they look at it and say, hey, my student needs to do this because by doing this, they're going to have a leg up in the future. Study abroad is the same thing, is by parents understanding and families understanding the benefits that students get from the experience. They'll look at it more as an investment and less of it as an expense.
Carrie, what's your next country, your next destination?
I'm interested in studying Arabic, so maybe in the Middle East and college.
My goodness, the most that I wanted to do was to go to King's Dominion in Northern Virginia when I was in high school.
For college day.
Yeah, well, I have to say good luck to you, your future endeavors, not only in high school and college, but also Andrew Gordon. Thank you so much for your insight, founder of Diversity Abroad. We certainly hope that we're helping get the word out about these programs and how useful and important they are. Children in general, but also in particular minority children. So thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Carrie, and thank you, David. Good luck to you both. And you are watching Our Take.
24 seconds. That's what you get to make it happen. You can run the break, find the big man inside, or swing it out and hit the three. Grab the board, and you get a new 24, just like that. But unfortunately, for endangered animals, there's no reset. Many are now facing extinction. And when their clock runs out, they're gone forever. So please, support conservation and never buy products made from these animals. There's no more time to waste.
When was the last time you drank one of these? Last week? Today? Right now? Did you know how much sugar was in that sweetened soda or entire bottle of a sports drink? Read the label next time. In this can of soda, there are 39 grams of sugar. That means 10 sugar packets or 10 teaspoons of sugar. The American Heart Association recommends that preteens and teens don't intentionally add more than 32 grams of sugar, which is 8 sugar packets or 8 teaspoons, to their diets per day. On average, kids ages 8 to 14 consume between 21 and 33 teaspoons of sugar per day. That's 3 or 4 times the limit. Yikes! Choose water, seltzer, milk, or unsweetened tea instead. You can control your sugar intake. Choose what you consume.
I came to Africa to see this. But I also found this. Every year, thousands of elephants are being killed just for their tusk. If we buy ivory, we're just helping the poacher. So please, don't do it. Because when the buying stops, the killing can too.
A very warm welcome to a very special guest, Deepak Chopra, doctor, philosopher, founder of the Chopra Foundation, and co-author of the new book, Brotherhood, Dharma, Destiny, and the American Dream. Deepak, thank you so much
Thanks,
for joining
Christy.
us today.
Thanks,
and we only have you for a little bit of time. I understand that you're flying out of here tonight.
Well, time doesn't exist.
Oh,
so.
I like that already. So we've got you for forever.
Yeah, eternity.
Forever. Well, let's talk a little bit about this new book, Brotherhood. This is a book that you co-authored with your brother, Sanjeev. It's a memoir, and I understand it's alternating chapters.
Yeah, you know, the two of us came almost 1 year apart to the United States in the 70s. We're both physicians. He ended up being the dean for education at Harvard Medical School and a professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School. I kind of went off in my own direction and expanded my idea of healing into mind, body, and spirit. But now I speak once a year at his courses at Harvard Medical School for continuing medical education. It's just the idea, you know, that you can have two brothers who came from the same womb, and even identical twins who have the same DNA, but a few years later, depending on their experiences and how they interpreted their experiences, even their genetic expression changes. And yet there's a bond that connects them. So it's an interesting story.
Your books, your writings, everything about you, Deepak, is so inspirational. And I'm curious, when it comes to this book, who is this for? Is this for the person who just wants to know more about you, your path? Is this something that you would also consider inspirational, a motivational
It's inspirational, I hope, but it's also about, you know, who are we and what is our true identity? It's also about what's happening in the United States right now in terms of racism and in terms of immigration policy and all the things that are happening in our country. You know, you have a government that's totally polarized. You have a president that has an ancestor that comes from Kenya, or father that comes from Kenya. So it's about all those issues. It's about the emerging multicultural, multi-ethnic, and hopefully more spiritual America that is becoming slowly the melting pot and the microcosm of our planet.
And you talk about in the book the discrimination, the frustration, the suspicion that you and your brother faced when you first arrived here in America. And as I was reading some of the background on this book, so much of what you were saying, I felt like we could hear the very same thing today. As though nothing has changed.
And yet, yes, there is a whole polarization that has occurred in America. So there's extremism in the right wing that has never been to this extreme before. On the other hand, you know, face it, we have Obama as president. We also have, you go to any campus in the country and you'll see South Asians, Africans, you'll see people from all over the world. 30% of all Nobel Prizes in the United States are given to people who were not born in this country. In fact, 50% of people in this country have at least one parent that came from another country. So that's great. In that sense, this is going to be the cradle of innovation and creativity. You go to Facebook or Google or any of the campuses there, and you see that, you know, almost every culture, every ethnic origin is represented there. That's what creates innovation. That's what creates the next step in our civilization. So I see, you know, the United States is a funny country. People dislike it, criticize it, condemn it, but if given a chance, they want to be here.
They do want to be here.
I have a question. What was it like writing this book with your brother?
We decided not to share our chapters with each other till the end.
Till the end, so you didn't know what he was going to write about?
No, but in the end we found that we had the same memories but slightly different interpretations, that's all.
Your book, though, is also about Dharma and destiny. First of all, define Dharma.
Dharma has many meanings. It means purpose in life. We all come here in this incarnation with some purpose, some higher vision. It also means what are your unique skills and talents. But it also, in a deeper level, means that you're part of a universe which is a big puzzle, like a jigsaw puzzle. Every part fits. There are no spare parts. And when you find your dharma, you create your destiny because you're singing your song in a way that only you can sing it.
And it seems like there are so many people that are trying to find their dharma, and perhaps they call it something else depending on what their belief
Well, I would say if
system
you had all the time in the world, if you had all the money in the world, how would you express yourself and who would benefit if you can find that? There's a Sufi poem, it says, I want to sing like birds sing, not worrying who listens or what they think. So when you sing like that, you found your dharma.
I understand later this summer you're actually going to be having a Sages and Scientists conference, correct?
We have a Sages and Scientists conference once a year at the Chopra Foundation. If anyone's interested, they can go to our website, choprafoundation.org. We bring the best minds in the world, scientific minds, physicists, mathematicians, cutting-edge researchers, evolutionary biologists, but we also bring philosophers and poets and musicians. And we talk about how can we collectively create a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier and happier world. How can we get rid of war, and how can we get rid of terrorism, not through oxymorons like war on war or war on terrorism, but creatively. How can we create more social justice? Anyone can come, and I can guarantee you they'll have a wonderful time and learn a lot.
I'm curious, this conference, is it born out of, in some way, even the relationship that you have with your brother? Because your brother, after all, went a truly, a Western scientific route.
The conference was born out of something else. I wanted to bring science and spirituality together, but my brother is actually going to be a featured speaker as well.
Wonderful. Well, Deepak Chopra, we truly enjoy having
Thank you.
And I know you're going to stick around for our next
course.
segment. We cannot wait to get, in fact, I can't wait to hear both what you and Demetria has to say about our next segment. And to find out what the next segment is all about, you're going to have to stick around. You're watching Our Take.
Basketball, it's a numbers game. But just listen to these numbers.
1 in 3 adults in this country are at risk of developing diabetes.
1 in 3.
Just think about what that looks like in here. Our families,
our friends,
our fans.
Let's change those numbers.
Learn your risk factors for diabetes.
Go to dribble2stopdiabetes.com and take the risk test.
It's fast, free, and easy.
Remember, your health depends on you. To learn more, go to dribble2stopdiabetes.com.
Bigger, stronger, and more domineering than any other. Elephants are the centers of the animal kingdom, but unfortunately today, they're under attack. Tens of thousands are being killed each year just for their ivory. So please support conservation and never buy products made from ivory, because when the buying stops, the killing can too.
Two-thirds of the earth is water. Can you swim?
tradition that dates back hundreds of years might be the answer for singles with little luck in finding their soulmate. The film The Namesake provides a glimpse of what an arranged marriage meeting might look like, arrangements that happen far more often than many people realize. And joining me from Ohio is a couple who supports the concept of arranged marriages. Doctors Rita Kathari and Deepak Chopra discovered love in a way some might consider non-traditional. Hi there, Deepak and Rita.
Hey. Oh, hi.
How's it going?
It's so good to talk to you. I'm going to come back to you in just a moment. I just want to introduce one other guest to this conversation. Also with us is Riva Seth. She is the author of First Comes Marriage, Modern Relationship Advice from the Wisdom of Arranged Marriages. Oh, Riva, do I have questions for you? And of course, Deepak Chopra joining us again this afternoon. Rita and Deepak, let me start with you, though. Your marriage is what some would consider semi-arranged. Explain to me how your courtship evolved and resulted in marriage.
Okay. We met in Cleveland. I had been living in Cleveland for many years after going to school in Kansas City. And I had met Deepak, and Deepak was very much interested in dating. And I said, "You're going to meet my parents first."
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, wow. So in order to just date, he had to meet your parents first before you'd even go out on a date with them?
Yes. I have to say, our first conversation was nearly 3 hours long. He was giving a talk in downtown at the Sheraton for a conference. I happened to meet him afterwards, and we ended up talking and talking. We took it to the lobby and kept talking, and I realized there was real potential.
Right.
So Deepak, I understand that you were married before in what Riva calls a love marriage, meaning that you didn't ask for your parents' permission. Right. And that didn't work out so well for you. So you were on board with really having both of your families kind of make the decision for you?
You bet. So that love marriage really turned out to be a hate marriage.
Oh.
And so once I had the divorce, I realized that I really didn't have much of a clue, and it would probably be a good idea to involve my parents in this whole process, because clearly the mistakes that I made in my first marriage, my parents had warned me about, and I just hadn't listened to them. So love turned to hate.
Well, I'm curious about your arrangement, because you guys met and you sort of hit it off, and then you took it to the parents to decide. So if your parents had said, "Hey, I don't think this is the best match," would you have kept dating, or would you continue to see each other and be interested?
Well, I think that what we would have done is that we would have probably asked them why and asked them to justify it or to explain it, and then we might have pursued kind of argument styles to show that they were wrong. But in our case, we didn't have that kind of scenario. There were different challenges. I mean, if I could just say, there were different challenges that Rita's father, for example, posed to me and posed to her and said, "Here's such a scenario that Deepak has. Can you address this? And only after you address this will I approve it." So in a way, he tested us.
My dad was not very happy to begin with. It was my parents. It was my dad that was really kind of unhappy with the whole idea. He had this notion that this person would be very, very much, someone that he had thought would be from North India, a Hindi speaker, who was Jain at that, and
so they had their expectations as well. I want to bring Riva Smith into the conversation. The name of your book is First Comes Marriage, Modern Relationship Advice from the Wisdom of Arranged Marriages. Riva, it sounds like what Deepak and Rita did actually goes a little bit further than what you're recommending or you're talking about, which is a true arranged marriage. There isn't any meeting of the potential bride and groom. It's all handled by the parents.
Yes and no. I don't actually advocate to have an arranged marriage, because I think I myself didn't have an arranged marriage, and it's a very culturally specific thing to do. What the book does is I've interviewed over 300 couples who had arranged marriages, and it takes the arranged marriage approach and says, what can we, in the way we date and approach our romantic lives, actually learn from arranged marriages. So for me, it's a bit of a different take, and it's a very personal book because I grew up in a small town just outside of New Jersey where I was pretty much the only non-white girl there, and my parents had an arranged marriage. And it was something I always wondered about, and it seemed very strange and exotic to me, but it really seemed to work, especially when a lot of my friends' parents were getting divorced by junior year. I started thinking, maybe, like, are my parents actually happy? Is there more to this than I ever thought? And so that's what led to the book, but I don't actually advocate having an arranged marriage for people not from the culture, because I think it is a difficult one to transition, but I certainly think there's a lot we can learn from how they approach relationships.
And Deepak Chopra, you and your wife, an arranged marriage, correct?
Not really. I mean, I was an intern at the medical school where I was, and she was visiting a patient of mine. And so I used to make excuses to go to see the patient. But of course, we found out that our parents were friends and they loved the idea.
Oh, okay.
So
we kind of get around it.
Yeah. But you know, I have a different take on this. I think that in a sense, every marriage is arranged, because when you set up your friend for a blind date, you're arranging it, right? And so in the traditional cultures, the marriages were not just between two people, they were between two families or two tribes or two royal families, you know, because then they maintained the socioeconomic status, the values that they shared, and there was safety in the arranged marriage because when you were in trouble, the whole family, two families were there to take care of you. Now, as we've moved into this area where they say love marriage, the arranged marriages are still about setting up. They don't force you, even in India or Africa. What they do is they set up a meeting between the boy and the girl based on their values and their socioeconomic status and their culture and their tastes. All of that is taken into account, and then you set up a meeting and you give the couple a chance to get to know each other. And it's not a forced situation at all. It's not love. It's not love at first sight, which really isn't love, because love is something that blossoms slowly and grows and evolves. What people call love at first sight is infatuation at first sight, which leads to a relationship which lasts about as long as a video program on YouTube.
You know, Demetria, given that your book is the go-to girl for advice for living your best single life, I've got to get your take on this. What are you thinking when you hear of this idea of arranged marriage or semi-arranged?
So I've had some pretty bad hookups. My mother did one of them. There was an interesting story we did for Essence once where my mother, my boss, and my best friend hooked me up with people. Now, to my mother's credit, she hooked me up with someone who was very attractive. He was about 10 years older than me, which I thought was interesting. But he was very settled, and he was definitely ready to get married. Our love connection didn't necessarily work, but he was engaged 8 months later. Like, he was definitely looking
ready
for a wife, and my mother spotted that. So I thought that was good, but just in terms of our dispositions and how we would get along, like, you know, I've got some energy. I'm like fun, and he was a little dry for me. So I don't know if I would trust Mom on that one. But I do think the idea of letting people who know you very well, who have your best interest at heart, not just, you know, safe and whatever. I do think it's interesting, and it makes for a fun date. And again, because you've got, you know, people who, you know each other on both ends, and your friends and family know one another, there's an extra incentive to kind of be on your best behavior and get things right. Nobody wants to deal with the consequences of, you know, families and friendships and social circles and such.
Sure. Deepak and Rita, when you tell your friends and people that are outside of your culture, people that aren't really aware of this idea of arranged marriage or semi-arranged or love marriage or what have you, what is their response to you telling them about involving your parents and helping you make that decision to eventually marry one another?
Well, the people that knew me and my ex-wife were all for it.
Sounds like that worked for you. What about you, Rita?
I do get some quizzical looks. You know, here, you know, you're dating long term, you're living with your significant other, you know, until those kinds of decisions are made, assuming that they marry at all. So yeah, I do get I do get questions. I mean, when we do talk about the fact that we were semi-arranged and that our parents were involved from the get-go, they question it.
Riva, I understand that for your book that you interviewed more than 300 women who were part of arranged marriages. What were some of the central themes that they told you about being in such a relationship?
There were several. I was surprised at how confident and happy. Again, I have to preface, I came into doing these interviews not sure what I would find. And I always add that happy women wanted to talk to me, but there was a real sense of greater security at the level of commitment that I found in these relationships, which really impressive to me. It was really interesting. Like, I learned a great deal that I then brought to my own personal and dating perspective from listening to the stories of these women. And one of them was the idea that, growing up the way we do with rom-coms and the idea that love solves all, there was such a pragmatic approach to marriage, which doesn't sound romantic, but it seems like it really makes marriage into the big decision it really is. I think of my friends and even myself before I did this, and I think I put more thought into choosing a college than I did into the dates I went on, which could have led to the man I eventually married. And one of the things I say we can take from the arranged marriage approach is that they're not afraid to say what they really want in a relationship. A lot of the women I spoke to tell me that in the process, the first step was that they sat down, often with their family, and made a list that these were their musts, their marriage musts. They needed to have a man who, say, had a certain level of education, or who had a religious background or valued spirituality. And that impressed me because I think that's very difficult to do in our culture, to just openly say before you go into anything that this is what I value and this is what I really want in terms of a relationship, versus just being spontaneous and seeing what comes your way.
Well, Riva Seth, thank you so much for certainly opening my eyes to this concept. Riva Seth joining us from Toronto, Canada, the author of the book, First Comes Marriage, Modern Relationship Advice from the Wisdom of Arranged Marriages. And also Deepak Chopra and Rita Kathari joining us via Skype from Cleveland, Ohio. Thank you as well for joining us today. You two look very, very happy in love, and I certainly wish you continued success. Aww. How sweet. Not a dry eye in the studio. Thanks again. And Deepak Chopra, thank you so much. And I understand that you will come back and visit us here on Our Take. All right, wonderful. I just put you under the spotlight, didn't I? And Demetria Lucas, thank you as well. It was good. The hour goes by quickly, doesn't it?
It goes by so fast. It was so quick. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're almost done.
I know. Well, that means you're going to have to come back as well.
I will definitely come back.
All right. I'm Christina Brown, and you're watching Our Take.
24 seconds. That's what you get to make it happen. You can run the break, find the big man inside, or swing it out and hit the 3. Grab the board, and you get a new 24, just like that. But unfortunately, for endangered animals, there's no reset. Many are now facing extinction. And when their clock runs out, they're gone forever. So please, support conservation and never buy products made from these animals. There's no more time to waste.
I wonder why anyone would do that to themselves. We all need air to breathe, to live, and so does the earth. But we're choking it with plastic bags. Let's stop using plastic bags and give the earth a chance to breathe. Refuse, reduce, reuse, recycle.
Ndingululu Shumsila. Mna ndingumama owasindayo kwi-cancer. I-cancer eyayisisibelekweni. Thina bantu imistake yethu apha ikhoyo kwawuthiwa umuntu une-cancer simjongela uba laa mntu ngomso uzosweleka. Andizange ndibe nabunzima kakhulu ngoba into ebangela uba nditsho eyam yabhaqwa msinyane ngoba into enyanzelekileyo kuba ube nethemba xa kuthiwa unento. Isapoti endayifumanayo kumyeni wam, kubantwana bam, nefemeli yam yonke. eyona nto ndandinayo mna entliziyweni yam kukuba okusalayo nam ndizophila ndifane nabanye abantu.
Lo myalezo niwuphathelwe yi-JSI and Livestrong Cancer Anti-Stigma Initiative.
It is now time to go from our take to your take. We want to hear from you and see what you've been up to online. And here is what our Twitter friends have been tweeting. At BSince83, everyone at Our Take Arise TV made me feel comfortable and at home. It was an awesome experience. And that coming from Bridget Kwame, who joined us for our medical tourism segment last week. Very fascinating segment about people that are spending thousands of dollars traveling to these exotic destinations to go under the knife. Bridget Kwame, a blogger and social media strategist and medical guru from Canada, joined us on the show to discuss that. Our next tweet coming from Jamie Jin, at Jamie Jin. One day I will get these right, at Jamie Jin. She writes, I was feeling at Silai on at Our Take Arise TV. Silai Abrams was our guest host yesterday. She is the founder of Truth in Reality organization. It is a foundation that is really dedicated to raising the awareness and profile of the portrayal of Black women in reality TV. Silai Abrams spoke passionately about her efforts to change the way Black women are portrayed in reality TV, but also simply raise awareness of its impact. And our next tweet, coming from Cece at Arise TV, and she also tweeted me at Brown Christina. Cece says, so interested in the world's most powerful women. Go sisters. That, of course, is in reference to a story that we did yesterday profiling the 11 Black women that were included on the Forbes 100 list of the most powerful women of 2013. There were certainly some familiar faces and names on that list, everyone from Oprah Winfrey, Beyonce, to First Lady Michelle Obama, but also other individuals, women like Ursula Johnson, the director, the CEO of Xerox. So, Cece, thank you for recognizing the importance and value of highlighting African-American Black women who are on the Forbes Most Powerful Women list of 2013. Let's take a look at Twitter message number 4. This one coming from Hamilton Hayes 18, writing, I believe a world run by women and mothers would be a welcomed change. And you know what, Hamilton? I'm going to have to say, I agree. Thank you so much for sending us your Twitter messages. Please keep them coming. And also remember, you can always go to our Facebook fan page where you can like us and also leave comments. And hey, you never know, you just might get your message said on the air live. Now I want to leave you with wedding traditions to the arts. In India, there are thousands of year-old traditions that include the arts, folk and classical music and dancers. And that is today's Our World video. Let's listen in. Me on Our Take. I'm online and on Facebook. See you back here tomorrow, same place, same time.